Tonight, voters across New York casting their ballots in the state's Democratic primary. Tonight, the question is, will Governor Cuomo's challenger, Zephyr Teachout, actually crack the 30% vote, or will she be a thing of the past as soon as the governor presses forward in his bid after tonight? Well, this evening, we're joined by Capitol's Ozzie Pibarro to join us with some primary predictions. And casino developers, they're facing off for a second day in Albany, making their sales pitches before the state board. Will the casinos be a tough sell, or are they a good bet for the state? Andrew's in the Capital District with more tonight. Plus, President Obama coming out swinging, saying congressional inaction is to blame for the nation's border crisis. Well, tonight, we'll be hearing from 3 local experts who come face to face with this crisis every day, and they're going to help put a face on this issue for us. That and much more is coming up. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And we begin with a look at primary day across New York. And many thought, let's be honest, 6 months ago, even less, this would be a ho-hum affair. But there is stuff to look out for tonight. The governor is facing off in a Democratic primary that he's going to win against Fordham Law professor Zephyr Teachout. But the margin is the question as Governor Cuomo seeks his second term. Teachout has blasted Cuomo for his disbandment of the Moreland Commission and for backing business-friendly tax policy she claims at the expense of liberal memes. Meanwhile, the governor's refused to even debate Teachout once and even snubbed her at that Labor Day parade where he pretended he couldn't even see the woman. Teachout needs to get 30% of the vote, according to many folks here, to move forward in the race here, at least as it relates to having some let's say, validity going forward. Now, Cuomo's running mate, former Buffalo Congresswoman Kathy Hochul, is also on the ballot, along with Tim Wu, Teachout's choice for lieutenant governor. Now, if Wu beats Hochul, here's a look at what the November ballot might look like. Wu would run alongside Cuomo on the Democratic ticket, but that's where things, or the simplicity, ends. While Hochul would run on the working families, independents, and women's equality party lines next to the governor, the vote totals could get all kinds of screwy. Let's bring in Capitol reporter Ozzie Pibarro, who joins us live now to talk more about this. And that artificial line, Ozzie, of 30%, give an idea why people say that if somehow, some way Teachout cracked that number, it's perceived a victory, even though she won't be moving on past tonight.
Well, it's about perception, and a lot of politics is based on perception. Andrew Cuomo didn't want a primary challenge and has always fought against the notion that he's not progressive enough for the Democratic Party. Remember, he had a close working relationship with Republicans, and then in the middle of his first term, he sort of turned it around, began angling more towards progressives. This is in the wake of Occupy Wall Street and those sort of movements. So he's really had a tough relationship with progressives on economic issues. And Zephyr Teachout is sort of the personification of those frustrations, and she's the place where voters will be able to express that frustration. So if his reelection, which was supposed to be easy, which was supposed to be a no-brainer, especially for the Democratic nomination, if there's a sizable majority within that Democratic Party that expresses opposition to him in any way, well, that really calls into question how far he can go outside of Albany. Remember, there's 2016. If Hillary Clinton doesn't run, a lot of attention is going to come on Andrew Cuomo, and there's going to be questions raised as to how progressive is he if he had this much of a hard time in a Democratic primary. Just how worried are the Cuomo people? And I ask that, Ozzie, because reportedly from some folks I know, there was their own internal polls had Teachout at 30%. They're doing robocalls today here. Some folks very close say the governor's definitely on edge with this. And a lot of people think this was self-inflicted, not just Moreland Commission, but how he really mishandled Teachout and in many ways avoiding it at all costs almost elevated her. How worried are they about how tonight could shake out and why they're going to be looking at each other if it doesn't go well and who they're pointing fingers at? Well, they're obviously pretty concerned. They tried to kick her off the ballot. The governor refused to even acknowledge her presence at the parade, which was very awkward. He notably didn't mention her name, and then he went on the attack. He's had a number of surrogates step forward and challenge her record and challenge her running mate's record, Tim Wu, on issues that are for everything from foreign policy and the relationship to Israel to whether or not they know enough about upstate and Albany. And you only do that if you're trying to really swat down this kind of challenge. And it reaches a level of comical absurdity when on one hand you're refusing to even acknowledge that there is a primary, and then you're having subordinates and surrogates and supporters try to beat them. Now, what they've done rhetorically is try to paint them as a fringe. They say things like, we don't even know who they are, which calls into question their record and underscores the fact that they are not very well known. And it sort of sows a seed of doubt in voters' minds. Now, the one thing Andrew Cuomo has going for himself is that he's very well known, and you can't say that he's an unknown quantity in this kind of primary. So for progressives who are supporting Cuomo, like Bill de Blasio, they don't attack Zephyr Teachout's policies. They don't even address what Tim Wu has done on things like net neutrality, which he's has a very strong record. But they say things like, well, we just don't know who they are. And that's meant to dismiss, discredit, and sow a seed of doubt in them.
Hey, Ozzie, last thing. Are the Cuomo folks more worried that Wu wins tonight or that Teachout cracks 30?
That's a great question. I think they're concerned enough about Wu, but I think if Zephyr does not get 30%, and if Wu loses, no matter how close that wins, I think they very quickly try to pivot and put all their attention onto Astorino. I think they're going to try to bury the whole idea of the perception problem and the benchmarks.
Ozzie, great job as always. I really appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Let's bring in Dominic Carter right now, political journalist and author. And Dom, let's bring up that graphic, if we could, if Wu were to win, what that ballot might look like for voters. Now, while people may say, Rich, this is inside baseball, cubed, it's really not. Because while nobody thinks, including you or me, that Astorino is going to beat the governor come November, unless something happens with Moreland or whatever else, explain when people look at this, how this could confuse the regular voter who doesn't follow the inside baseball like you and I do.
Well, here's the problem for Governor Cuomo. Using that ballot right there, if Mr.
Wu, I'm sorry, and this assumes that Wu, for conversation, beats Kathy Hochul tonight.
Right. If Mr. Wu, with the endorsement of the New York Times and the Energize campaign, should he win, it could be a nightmare for Governor Cuomo.
Because?
First of all, his father went through the identical situation when he was elected governor. So it would be deja vu all over again.
Right.
That's right, Mr. Del Bello. Second of all, this is all about 2016 tonight for Mr. Cuomo.
But just explain how a voter could get confused.
How they can get confused is this is all about 2016. If they vote for Cuomo on any other line, as long as Hochul was his running mate, all the tallies would be combined. Under this ballot, assuming Mr. Wu wins, they're not combined. And it's all about 2016, and it would lower the governor's victory margin. So it would be a major headache, a major problem.
So to be clear for the voter, if somebody decides, oh, I'm going to vote for Cuomo under the independence line with Hochul, and the person next to him votes for Cuomo with Wu, you're only counting one of those votes here in the final tally. You can't put them both in the same bucket.
And it's all about running up the score. And the perfect example, Chris Christie in New Jersey, put Bridgegate aside. When he ran for re-election, he completely ran up the score, right?
Yep.
That made him a leading presidential candidate on the presidential side. Tomorrow, Andrew Cuomo wants us to wake up and say, wow, Andrew Cuomo has a shot at the nomination. He wants us to look beyond Astorino on the Republican side and look towards 2016. I contend 2016 is never going to happen for Mr. Cuomo, no matter what happens.
But as you said, tonight's about perception. The other story maybe we talk about tomorrow, besides the lieutenant governor and really the ballot headaches that would bring, is you got 3 people under indictment right now running for re-election as state lawmakers up in Albany. 2 of them, at least one of them's got a pretty good chance of winning, arguably even 2 of them. Malcolm Smith even's close on this thing. Very possibly after tonight we're going to be saying same old thing in Albany, right? Doesn't matter if you're a crook or even a alleged crook, you still could keep your job, right?
Bottom line, unless you're convicted of a felony, you stay on the ballot and you can keep your job. But we have several officials with misdemeanor convictions, and they are attacking press photographers. They are still in Albany. And if they win, Richard, and there's no conviction on a felony case, they will stay in office. That's the law.
Interesting. Dominic, my friend, as always, thank you so much. Obviously, we'll be talking a lot tomorrow about what happens tonight in the primary. And head over to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on our question. Again, that artificial number, 30%, that everyone's been throwing around as a benchmark. Do you think Zephyr Teachout hits that tonight? And again, if you do, what do you think that means for the governor, not just in November, but beyond? Okay, coming up next, everyone. Casino developers, they're back at it today, making their sales pitches to get the green light to move forward on plans to construct casinos in New York. We're going to have a look at some of the plans being unveiled today. That when we come back. Andrew's in Albany.